Hi, good afternoon. Oh, it's afternoon here in Los Angeles. I'm Kirsten Schaefer. I'm the Executive Director of Women in Film in Los Angeles. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really want to give a big thank you to the 5 Nordic embassies for supporting this panel series that Women in Film International has so beautifully curated. It's taking place over the entire month of February, and I think even a little into March. So thank you also to Women in Film International for inviting me to moderate today's panel. Before we start, I would, oh, sorry, I forgot one more thing, to thank the Women in Film and Video in DC, who is also the host of this series. We are very fortunate to have with us today the ambassador of the Norwegian Embassy in Washington. Please join me in welcoming Anniken Kruntes.
Thank you, Kirsten. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our Norwegian segment of this Nordic Film Festival. I think that even after a year of virtual events, I find that high quality events such as this one actually can contribute to more people getting access to culture, which is a good thing. Mm-hmm. And film being a very important one of culture. It's very exciting that we are potentially joined by people from all corners of the globe for this. So thank you, Kirsten, and our panelists and our partners for organizing this event. Many of our listeners and viewers have probably seen Hope by now, and some are still planning on seeing it. I must admit I spent part of my weekend in a very emotional state while watching this deeply personal film. I cried and I laughed. It's definitely a moving film. Being a Norwegian, I recognize some very Norwegian aspects of it, but it certainly speaks to the universal topic of love, family, hope, and despair in the face of grave illness. It's wonderful that the film has been shortlisted for an Oscar, and I've also heard news that it will be adapted into a television series by Nicole Kidman, proving the international interest for the film. In general, I sincerely hope that our film festival can help shed more light on Nordic women involved in all aspects of filmmaking, acting, directing, creating, not for the sake of them being women, but for the sake of having all sorts of stories and all sorts of perspectives being shown to the global film audience. It can maybe also serve as an inspiration for aspiring girls and women to enter this industry and to have their own stories told. Now I look forward to listening to Maria Sødahl elaborate more on her film and also the panel with some of her colleagues. So I'll simply say thank you to all of you who participate and hand it back over to you again, Kirsten.
Thank you, Anniken, for those great words, and again for the embassy's support of this series, alongside of 4 other, so 5 total Nordic embassies that came together for this month of incredible programming. So thank you. It is now my honor to introduce the director of Hope. Maria, will you please turn your camera on and join us? Hello. It's so funny. I was waiting for the audience to applaud. And then I realized they're applauding in their own rooms. Yeah. Maria, this is such an incredible film. I didn't know a lot about it going into it. I intentionally hadn't read anything, and within 10 minutes knew how special this experience was going to be of watching this film that you have made. Later this afternoon, in about half an hour, we're going to be joined by some other directors, and we're going to talk a little bit more about telling personal stories. So I wanted to focus this half an hour with you really on the craft, because it is such an exquisite film with so many details in every area of the filmmaking, from the production design to the score, that I want to be able to really get into that with you. So let's start by having you tell the audience about how you came to tell this specific story.
Firstly, it's the most autobiographical project I've ever done, because it's a portrait of 9 days in my own life when I had terminal cancer diagnosis. So I was not supposed to survive. So when death was cancelled, and I had, a grieving over the fact that I probably couldn't, open up and continue doing my métier. I tried to write about different stuff, but it didn't work. And then friends said, but you have to tell your experience. And I said, no way. So because I thought it was, it would easily become a sentimental cancer story, as opposed to what I wanted to tell at the end of the day, and have tried to tell a story which is much more about life and how we live our lives, and not so much about death. So it's a story which has, been written through memories, having enough distance to be able to be personal as opposed to private. So this was something happening in 2010. And so it took 9 years to get it, get it out there. And also I was not able to work, for quite a few years. So, yeah.
When you set out to once you had written the story and you started thinking about the filmmaking, what kinds of either inspirations or ideas did you have? Like, what did you want to make sure that you conveyed in the actual filmmaking?
This project is so special, because it's, as I said, it's very, very close to a certain period of my life with the people around me, etc. And it's I realized that I couldn't make a hybrid, like some fiction, some truth. It had to go all in and do truth. And truth is a relative thing, but still, because it has its inner logic. So I really wanted to make something which was very truthful, very raw, very uncensored. Because when you get a terminal cancer diagnosis, and survive, you get an enormous amount of courage. So I was totally, shamelessly studying, my own persona through my family members, 4 years back, as a character who was very drugged and very self-conscious, or navel, what's that word?
Navel gazing?
Yeah, navel gazing, which you become when you're dying. Right. It's all about you surviving. So I saw something which was very dark and very raw, but also very absurdly, it's a lot of humor in it. It's a lot of human failure. It's a lot of, all the other characters tiptoeing around this woman. And I was very occupied of making a love story. But not love only as between man and woman, but our ability to love and to receive love, which becomes like very crystallized when it's gone, getting to an end. And right. In this story, the main character gets 3 months more to live, which is a lot and nothing. Yeah.
You also made very strong aesthetic choices. It's a beautiful film. A lot of it, I think, that is told in it to me, it felt wide and big, and you see the whole warmth of all of the different atmospheres they were in, but also very specific and detailed. And so my question for you is, how did you what were you thinking about aesthetically, and how did you put the different elements of that team together?
Yeah, I worked with very close colleagues who also worked on Limbo, my first movie, which was totally necessary, because of the stage I was in. Manuel Alberto Claro, who's Danish, Chilean, and after my first film, he became Lars von Trier's DP. He is a wonderful held-hand cameraman, and he's like one of the actors. He just joins in and becomes part of them. So this movie, which is, in one way, is sort of overpopulated with 6 children, tons of doctors, a lot of characters, a lot of life. And to grasp this without manipulating, I think that, we had some keywords which we wanted to keep in mind through the whole production, which was mess. Mm-hmm. Mess in modern family, mess, physically mess in this apartment, which is, you can have bad mess and good mess. Studying all this in all aspects was part of our thing. And also, which all movies actually do, but still very much in this one, to keep the sense of truth and sentimentality as a, really, really strong issue. And it's funny when you said, and this beautiful score, there is no score in this movie. Because we, every thematic way to manipulate, which film is manipulating, so we thought this movie can't have, violence. We tried that just for fun in the editing room when we were tired because it sucked. But, so it's only source music. All the way, and there is a classical piece in the very opening of the movie, but which is from her dance show or choreography, and that's used after the movie. So then it becomes film, but then it becomes a score, but not in the movie. It's nothing. And so it's it's how you work with sound in general that you can manipulate without it, keeping it organic. And the whole apartment is built in studio. Mm. So we really wanted to get the feel that it was location. So we had a 300 square meter studio. You spent almost all the budget. And apart from the actors, and to make this place, make it believable that somebody had been living there for a long time. So as it is a portrait of a couple's long life, but told in 9 days, right. That the apartment, and of course all the kids and stuff. And we wanted it to be a dark movie because it's also dark Norway, winter, Christmas, but the darkness is also warm. And and of course, because of the medical theme plot, it's also dark existentially, but it has all these different shades of dark.
Yeah, I noticed there's candles in almost every scene, including in some of the hospital scenes, which might be culturally specific. In the US, you would never see a candle in a hospital.
Yeah, but this is allowed in Norway. It's many things which is specific for Norway. And I also decided very, very early on, because I've lived this myself. I've been in and out of hospitals for years, and I've got to know a lot of oncologists and doctors, and studying them, so I decided not to use actors in those parts, but using real doctors and medical people. And that's a huge part of the movie, actually. I think the way it feels and looks, because they're typecasted. We casted like 200 doctors who voluntarily came to wanted to be in the movie, which was a big surprise, so many who doesn't want to be doctors, they want to be actors. Well, anyhow, they were there, and also with the children, and this mixture of amateurs and pros, mixture with Hollywood actor Stellan Skarsgård and pros and theater actress Andrea. That is tricky, but when it works, it's so great, because actors become, they have to step up, because it's actually the doctors who are the real ones. That made a really interesting energy.
I really appreciated the range of doctors and medical opinions, because I feel like so many of us deal with that in different ways, right? It's so hard to get one answer, right? Where you are always getting, depending on who you talk to, you're always getting a slightly different, or sometimes dramatically different answer. And I thought that was really representative of sort of the state of medicine. Another thing that really struck me was kind of the story that was told between the story. Like there was a moment kind of towards the end of the movie where the main character is talking to the family, and you see one of the stepsons kind of wince, right, as she's talking about actually it's the toast, where his best friend is talking about the beginnings of their relationship, and you've never heard any of the children say anything negative about their stepmother. They appear to totally love her, but you see in his face the complexity of their relationship. And I thought that was just throughout the entire film really well done. And I wonder if that's a thing that you were thinking about, trying to just tell it in the most, to leave some room in it, or if that happened in the editing process.
Yeah, it's to make such a movie which is so personal. I'm also, dragging my whole family into it, although it's her point of view. It's told through her, strictly visually through her point of view. But of course, I had to ask for permission to do this from both my husband, my children, my stepchildren, so that they were comfortable with it in some sense. But how could they be comfortable with it? It's impossible. So I told all the children that I wanted not to portray you and you and you and you and you, although there are 6 of them. I wanted to portray the mechanism of a family.
Right.
And of a blended family, because I think that's very much an understream in the film, the modern family, and how we deal with that in normal life, as opposed to when somebody's dying or somebody's getting born.
Right.
When the biological stuff comes up on the surface. And I know a lot of audience who thinks that the most disturbing scene is when the main character says that she actually loves her own children in a different way, maybe stronger, than her stepchildren, which is something which she can't say, but so many relates to in some sense. It's also about children, but it's not about, and out of this comes a discussion often of, it's not about loving more or less, but loving differently.
Right.
Yeah. So of course, I've been thinking a lot of that in how to portray this, in a truthful way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, ahead of the movie. When we premiered in Toronto, it's based on a true story, which is like really generic, and yeah, all stories are based on a true story. And ended up, when premiering in Norway, it said, "This is my story, the way I remember it."
Right.
Which makes it's not a story about will she survive or not. But yeah.
I imagine your husband has seen the film. Have all the children seen the film?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I have an agreement pact with all of them, actually. That the process of making it and how they were involved is fine, but how they respond to the movie, that's not. I mean, they are out there. That's their story. That's not my story.
Right.
So, but what is for certain is that they will never watch this as a normal feature. You know.
Of course.
Yeah. Because it's very much, I have in a way stolen their memory of that certain week in a way, because the film is so, yeah. At the other hand, probably not again, when years go, your own memory is probably stronger, I hope.
Well, perhaps one of them will become a filmmaker and tell the story from their memory.
Exactly, or maybe more of them, because I've got like 4 stories going on. Yeah,
that would be amazing. I was also really struck, and kind of in the same vein, by the way you allowed and I know filmmakers do this, but I just thought it was a special and important part of the story, the way that you allowed the camera to sort of linger on certain moments. One that struck me was after the main character takes her medication, she puts it back into her purse, puts a purse up on the shelf, and the camera stays on that purse for a few extra seconds. And for me, I was like, oh, what's going to happen? Because, when she takes the medicine, you don't really know what direction she's going to go in, right? And so what is going to happen she's at a party after she takes this medicine? Is she going to eat a whole lot more cheese, or is she going to sort of explode? And so I thought that was a really useful kind of mechanism for, engaging our brains in a different way. And it was obviously, a conscious choice. But, what were you thinking when you went into, because you did that in a lot of different ways. Like, what were you thinking when you went into that?
I think maybe in a more general way, I think this movie is also kind of an emotional thriller, if you want to put it that way, and I really didn't want to be, do everybody understand now? Now I can live the scene. I wanted to forget about the audience. I just wanted to go on just like they do. They've got very little time to deal with this, and very little time for grief, very little time for reflection in this period. And I wanted the audience to be like exhausted when they had seen the movie. Mm-hmm. Films, they talk to you, your heart, your head. But I wanted this movie like this too, but to be like, you should be like physically exhausted. and so such a scene like the, putting the medicine up there, and, it's about mess. It's about we don't know what she's going to do at this party. She has no idea how she's going to solve it. So it's, it's an act of, okay, I put this here and try to breathe and try to, nobody's going to see my state of mind. I mean, all these things, physical things, which can help you to the actress. She did a great job herself on finding ways to articulate stuff in body language. And so did Stellan, in his passive way, doing just small things. He could just like lift a finger and it was drama. Yeah.
I noticed in in the kitchen scenes, there's often a knife rack behind them, and there's like 14 knives. Is this a Norwegian thing, or is this specific to this character?
That is a little bit out of control, actually, from the production designers we have. Yeah, it's not Norwegian. It was, yeah.
But it was for me in keeping with seeing these small details and thinking, how, what is that telling me about this character? What's coming next? That kind of like the thriller part of it. Like when I saw those, because I think there's maybe 3 times where you see that shot of those knives, and I was like, oh my God, is she going to do something with the knife?
You're the first to mention this. So I'm just thinking, yeah.
Well, to me, it was just, one more of many, many moments of really very accomplished filmmaking. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is this is being made into an American television series. What has that process been like for you?
It hasn't started yet, really, I mean, the rights are sold to Blossom Films, and Nicole Kidman will executive produce and star in the movie. So, and a wonderful writer called Alice Bell, Australian, she will write the limited series. She has started out, and I will be a consulting producer. So we have just touched base, and they've been working on it for some time. To me, it means, of course, it's a huge choice to sell such a personal story. But on the other hand, it's not becoming a feature. It's not a remake.
Right.
It's going to be inspired by in a limited series. So it's going to be, I hope it's going to be very different from the feature.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious what they're going to cook together.
Me too.
Yeah.
I look forward to seeing how they figure that out.
Yeah. And hopefully it will be very different and has another quality.
Well, we are at 12:30, and I think we're going to move on in just a second to part 2 of this afternoon's discussion. Like I said in the beginning, I was deeply moved by your film, and it's a kind of just exquisite filmmaking that made me so actually joyful and full of hope to watch. And it is, on the short list for the Oscars, and I'm wishing you best of luck that you win that Oscar, because it's well deserved.
Thank you.
So now we are going to be joined by a few other directors to continue this conversation and focus a little bit more on personal stories, and the title is Personal Stories and Big Budgets. I think we'll talk a little bit more about women producing film, directing films in this climate. So I think it is time for me to welcome the other directors. I want to start by, and in fact, I'm going to start with a producer. We have with us today the producer of A Perfectly Normal Family. Please welcome Matilda. Let's see. I wonder if I did that too early. This is the challenge of Zoom. Well, I did see that director Nisha Ganatra has joined us. And so if we could please welcome, Nisha has most recently directed The High Note. Please welcome Nisha. Now I think I'm definitely too early. So let's you and I keep chatting for a few minutes, and I'll wait for the signal from the control room. to let me know that everybody's ready. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Now they're here. I think we're ready. So I'm going to go back, and we'll start with today we have the producer of A Perfectly Normal Family. Please welcome Matilda.
Hi.
Hi, Matilda. Thank you for joining. And then we have Nisha, who is the director of Pleasure. Please welcome Nisha.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Hello. Nice to meet you. And then Nisha, who is the director of The High Note.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. Hi. So glad to have you all here. Welcome. So I wanted to start on this theme of personal narratives and have each of you talk a little bit about how you came to make your most recent film. So we have just been talking to Maria about a very personal narrative, one that is, based on her own life. So I wanted to move to Matilda, who is joining us because the director is out ill today. We're really happy to have you. And so in some of my questions, I think I'll be asking you to represent the director's point of view. So could you talk to us a little bit about how A Perfectly Normal Family came to be?
So actually, we, Malou and I and Renee Esra that I produced together with, we had another project at the Danish Film Institute, but the commissioner wasn't feeling the project. So he just asked Malou, like, do you have something? What do you have? And she's like, well, I have this story and it's based on my own story and my own life. And yeah, it's about an 11-year-old girl that experienced that her father is transgender. So he immediately was like, do that. And we were all sitting in the room like, really? Okay, yeah, we're gonna let's work on that. And yeah, so Malou just she went through a process like reading her father's journals and starting to go back how it was for her. And and it was super exciting. And me and Renee, we just knew immediately that we needed to make this film because it was her first feature film. And I think it was very special that it was based on her own experience.
I really appreciated seeing that story through the eyes of maybe 12-year-old girl, because that's something we have not really seen very often. And it was, I thought, both a unique perspective and also really pulled, a good way into that story.
So I mean, that was also what I loved about the story, that it was, I mean, for me, I know it's like about a father being transgender, but for me, it's about a young girl experience like a big change in a family. It's a divorce, so it's really a film that a lot of people can relate to, I think.
Yes, I agree. Well, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about that, but I'm going to move on for a minute to Nisha, who's next on my screen, who directed The High Note this year, which I know is not Nisha's personal story, but very much the story of the writer. Nisha also made a movie in the sort of late 90s, early 2000s called Chutney Popcorn, which was for you a very personal story. And so can you talk just first about The High Note and your decision to direct that and what about it, sort of pulled you in? And then I've got a follow-up for you about Chutney Popcorn.
I know it's hard. It's interesting because I was thinking a lot about your question about personal stories, not personal stories. And I feel like to take on a film as a director or producer or actor, like it has to be personal in some regard. Otherwise, personally, I don't know where to put the camera, how to tell the story if I don't feel like it's a personal story. So I think we find our way into all of these things in a personal way. But for me, for the high note, it was, you know, two women of different generations, you know, being really good at their jobs. This is such a sad low bar. Now I'm realizing that, like, oh, here's a movie where the women are really good at what they do. They don't fight with each other. They don't stab each other in the back to get ahead. They end up supporting each other. It's talking about how difficult it is in our industry. And it was just, to me, like a really fun, old-fashioned studio film where you just felt good, it looked good, and everybody was very appealing in this way that, like, I hope to sort of inspire a young generation of women into becoming music producers, because there's sadly so few female music producers. So to me, that movie was more like a love letter to our industry and everything we've all gone through to get where we are.
So your first feature, Chutney Popcorn, was a very personal story for you.
That was very different.
And I think often, I mean, this is not always true, but often people's first films are, you know, very personal stories. What was the, I mean, other than budget, which I know is incredibly different for the two movies, what was that like to tell a story then that was so deeply personal versus one that is sort of more universal?
I think it's just, I mean, one, it was my first movie, so I didn't know really, there was nothing to compare it to, you know, you're just sort of slogging along telling this story that you're dying to tell by any means necessary, and there's no thought. And I also think it's important to note that when I was making that movie, I believed it was a huge commercial film. Like, I didn't know I was making a small movie about an Indian lesbian. Like, I thought, this is like a big studio rom-com, everyone's gonna love it. Like, you know, I think I had eyes on, you know, this being like a big theatrical Hollywood release. And now that I've worked a little more in this industry, I understand that that was never going to happen. But at the moment and at the time, I really thought I was telling a story to a big audience, you know. So I don't know. It's a totally different mindset, I think, also when you're kind of, you know, 24 and being like, I got this, you know.
I think you're right, like for the time period and the budget, and that it was your first movie. But I think if you were to make Chutney Popcorn now with the budgets you're working in now, that it could be a big commercial success. Maybe,
yeah. Maybe we could remake it. Netflix is apparently doing a lot of lesbian rom-coms now.
Okay.
Maybe Frida Pinto is free.
All right, we're gonna move from rom-com to pleasure. Nina's film, which I had the pleasure of watching over the weekend. I actually tried to watch it at Sundance. I had put it in my queue, and when I went to watch it, was sold out. It was actually the only movie during my festival, my selections, that were sold out. So congratulations for selling out. But I think also it's you know, one of the most talked about films coming out of the festival. In part, you know, because of the subject matter, but I think more so because of the filmmaking. Like it's a tremendously accomplished film. Am I correct that it's your first film?
First feature, yes.
Your first feature, yeah. And what was it that drove you to want to tell this particular story?
I mean, I've been interested in the topic. All my films, I mean, I've been interested in porn as a topic for nearly 20 years. Yeah, I was an anti-porn activist when I was 16, and then as my graduation project in high school, I made a photography study on like the male gaze on the naked female body. So I've been interested in those, like in the male gaze and the power aspects on media images and sexuality identity. So everything, I started making films in 2008, short films. So since then, like all of my films have had those subjects. But porn has been an ongoing thing. I also studied gender studies and wrote an essay about porn at university. So yeah, it's been a very long journey, 20 years, I would say. But then I made a short film with the same title, Also Pleasure, who was awarded in Cannes 2013 and also competed in Sundance the year after. So yeah, it's been a long journey.
So would you say that what's personal about this story is the ways that women are represented? Its connection to the ways that women are represented on screen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really like to use that word personal, like, because I feel like we have a tendency to label women as doing personal stuff and men to do more what's the word, general, like they tell more stories about the world and we tell stories about ourselves, which I don't agree on. I think that in a way, every story you tell, like you have a protagonist, that's your hero, and that is you in a sense, even if it's a cartoon character or, so so I don't really know. I mean, but then of course it becomes extremely personal when the personal aspect of this would maybe, of course, be that it's personal because it's so important to me. It's a subject that I like, that I've spent like most of my life like dealing with, and then it's also maybe like in a way a little bit more personal than the average film process, because someone called it that I've been like method directing. So I knew like a little bit, like I knew what I wanted to make the film about, and I know like but I had to find the story in the world. So I spent about 4 years like digging my way into the porn industry and trying to, in a way, experience that world from the inside without doing porn myself. But I lived in a model house, for example, with other girls and like tried to come as close to my character as possible. But I wouldn't say that on like the story, like the story is nothing that I had experienced before. It wasn't something like, oh, I want to tell this personal story that I have been carrying since my childhood or whatever. But it was more that like I wanted to find this story in this world that I was interested in, and then try to live it in order to tell it somehow.
That makes a lot of sense. And I agree, and I imagine most of the other panelists will agree about this idea that that you raise, that men's stories are somehow universal, and that women's stories are not, and that that maybe even shifting, how we think about it, how we talk about it in public space is part of how we make that change happen. We did a research study, Women in Film, the Sundance Institute, or we commissioned a study from Stacy Smith at USC around many aspects of gender in filmmaking. And one of the things that we found is that there's a perception of a gendered marketplace. So this idea that films made by and about women don't perform as well. And therefore they don't get as big of marketing budgets. And I think in order to break that down, we probably ourselves have to stop talking about them as personal stories. And I wonder, Maria, if you agree with this kind of idea that even talking about it as personal stories is and you having one of the most personal stories on this panel, what you sort of think of that framing. Oh, you're on mute. There, try again.
Unmute.
There you are.
Yes, okay, sorry. First of all, I just want to say that I agree with Ninja in the sense that the word personal is tricky and misused, abused, because everything we do is personal as directors. I mean, everything comes from somewhere, which is you. So in that sense, it's personal. But I think, and also I think that if you are personal or specific, it will become universal. So I don't think it's two different things. I think the universal qualities derive from something very specific and personal. So I think it's just it's a wrong premise in a way. And me myself, I mean, I think that working with memories is very interesting. So I think if you go way back in time and work with memories, then all the noise disappears and you crystallize the emotion, which is universal. So the personal story, in my case, became very universal with the audience. And I had a producer who said, this movie could sell a lot, he thought, okay? So that was his, again, agenda, that this could be a very commercial film as opposed to, the budget and how small it is in international sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a good observation. It makes me think more about how we kind of get out, culturally and in these kinds of dialogues, how we kind of get out of almost reifying or reinforcing the idea that women tell, personal stories. But also I'm aware that some of what's happening here is really related to budgets, at least in the US, that it kind of like what Nisha and I were talking about a few minutes ago, if you put more money and marketing and bigger stars into it, then it kind of automatically becomes a more universal story. And so I think my next question is there any kind of story that is just personal and not universal? Or are all stories ultimately universal stories? If they're made for an audience, I would say that they are.
Is this a question to me?
Well, yes, because you're still on my screen.
Okay. On the top of my head, I would say that the movies which are private because they haven't been able to translate it because they have no distance to the subject, which is movies I'm seeing quite a lot of actually. In a way, they think it's so strong, but there's no compass, there's no distance to it. I think that they are only private as personal and not universal.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I see also that Nina has her hand raised. Would love to hear your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the whole concept of a story, actually. Like an experience is personal, but transferring that into a story is what is universal, because then you start to speak the universal language, which is storytelling. So that's the big difference between the personal experience and then putting it into a story. And I think, unfortunately, that is also like why we tend to see, like, it's easier to see men as doing something universal because it's easier to see them as creators and genius. And then when a woman does something, it's like, oh, she has a lot of emotions about things she's experienced that she wanted tell us about herself. But so that's all. Yeah, but we all know that that it's harder for everyone, I mean myself included, to look at women as like artists in the same way.
Right. Nisha.
Yeah, I was just what Nina's saying and what Maria said before so beautifully about distilling it down to the universal emotion, right? And the difference between an experience and storytelling. But I love how eloquently you both put it. And then the other end of that too is when you do tell, when you do the very hard work of translating your experiences into a story, then you get asked, was it autobiographical, right? And that to me is the more interesting thing, that why do we assume women can't speak outside of their experience? Like, we're all asked over and over, was that film autobiographical? And of course, you know, everything is a little bit and everything isn't, because we did the hard work of being storytellers and translating what was autobiographical experiences into a story. You know, like even with Chutney Popcorn, I don't have a sister, but I certainly know what it's like to have a sibling and the sibling dynamic. So it's really interesting to me how another way to sort of keep women in a separate category is to say, you know, obviously Maria's story is autobiographical. You know, like,
right. So
she's raising her hand though. So
yeah.
Oh, Maria's raising her hand. Okay, Maria. Yeah. And then I have a question for Matilda in just a minute, but I want to hear from Maria first.
Yeah, just a comment that I think, you know, traveling around with my movie, I realized that, you know, even critics can't get around the fact that I'm here, I survived this story, you know, and couldn't start talking about the movie making, the filmmaking, the techniques used, the choices made. How did you get a movie to become this feeling, you know, which you did very nicely, Kirsten, in the Q&A, you know, and that's so interesting. And at a certain moment, I thought, you know, now I'm just gonna start talking about it, even if they don't ask me, okay? So see what happens. And they were. No, it's just interesting. And, you know, I don't know what would have happened if it was a male director who had done, you know, made the same exercise of doing an autobiographical movie like I did. You know, I have no idea. But I think it has to do with autobiographical stuff and not gender. Because I think people get so disturbed by it or emotionally attached by it that they forget their profession and, you know, go totally
there's so much skill and craft in all of these films, that I don't understand why an interviewer wouldn't focus on that and why they would only focus on like your personal story. That just seems so this does seem
our responsibility, because that's how it is. So it's our responsibility to, you know, change that ourselves.
Right.
Yeah. I think.
But I also wonder, like, how many because I don't know if you have this issue there, but we certainly do in the US, that only a small percentage of the critics and reviewers are women. And I imagine that also impacts it.
No.
Even the women that were asking the same question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It does seem to be a universal theme that, you know, what we're talking about here around how personal stories get sort of, you know, pigeonholed in this way. And Matilda, I want to be mindful that this is not necessarily true around the world and across every culture. So I wanted to see if that has also been your experience.
About?
That when women tell stories that or as filmmakers, they're sort of classified as personal stories, whereas when men do, even if they're in similar veins, they're more universal stories.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's I was thinking a lot about it today because when I got asked to come here instead of Malou, because it's so weird to sit and talk about her, you know, it's her story, like her film that I produced but I was thinking about the market and everything, and I was thinking about that in Denmark, most of the cinema goers are female. But we're just presented with mostly film with men, by men. So we go in and we watch all these film and we do it and we can relate and everything. And then, so then there's the female director or the female lead, and then it becomes always like it's always a female director. We always put a gender in front of it, and then I don't know, but I think we just. I totally lost the question.
That's okay. It is also, what is it, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock where you are?
Yeah, I just put my baby to bed. So I'm like, what is it? Yeah.
Well, it is great actually to have a producer on this, on the panel, so that we could talk. I want to shift a little bit to talking about budgets.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable talking about the budget of the film and what that kind of process was like, putting that together, and if you find as a producer that the budgets are bigger or smaller depending on if it's perceived as a personal film or not.
I think definitely the budget is smaller because you have to be a risk taker to put money in a film. I think we're so lucky to have a film institute in Denmark that give us like money to make films that maybe are not commercial in a sense. So in that way we're lucky, but I can also tell that we have a problem in Denmark, that it is mostly the male directors that gets the most grants and also when we pitched the Malu's film for other financiers, it was seen as like not commercial enough or too controversial, and for me that was pretty ridiculous because it was a family film that most other, like, I didn't see why that would be controversial. But and then you see a film, I'm not going to mention the film, but then you see films with like only male characters directed by a man, and it gets so easily money. But I have to say, in Denmark we're working on it and we're talking about it, but I mean sometimes talking isn't enough.
Right. Nina, I know in Sweden you have a gender equality initiative through the Swedish Film Institute. I think 50% of funding goes to female directors. I'm curious about how you put the budget together for your film. How much of it is Swedish financing, and if you are seeing any change in the culture there because of that mandate. You're on mute.
Sorry, I don't know the exact numbers on top of my head of how much was Swedish, but I think about 3, like maybe 15 or something, 15, 16 Swedish million of 20 or 21 was from Sweden. So we also got funding from 2 other European countries, but nothing from, but so mostly Swedish. I mean, definitely since I started making films 10 years ago up until now, there's been a huge shift. Like the generation before me have had, like, it's been a struggle. Like when I started making films, I didn't have that many women to look up to or like look at and see that this is possible. And now it's been, yeah, in some ways I could even say that it's been easier being a woman, but that's only like when you, not when, if you want to do something bigger budget. As soon as you go above like the traditional first feature indie budget, then it's completely different thing. Then it's still super male dominated. But that's also like where, yeah, when the Swedish Film Institute, like it's a difference between what is government funded and what is more private investments.
And is yours Swedish Film Institute funding?
Yeah,
or private?
The Swedish Film Institute, yeah.
And so now that you've made one feature, do you feel like you have access to bigger budgets if you want it?
Yes, I think so, definitely. That's what I assume, but it's very, yeah, I don't know yet, but I think I should have that. So
I imagine there's a lot of excitement and interest in you and your career at in this particular moment, right? Like 3 weeks after the premiere at Sundance.
Yeah, hopefully it will stay this way. We'll see.
Do you know what kind of movie you want to make next?
Yeah, I've always had like this 10-year plan. That was part of the plan to do this one as my first feature, and then the second one, because the second one needs a much bigger budget and needs to be like an American, like shot in the US with US actors, because it's parody of a very traditional American comedy, like high school comedy. So I'm hoping to make it like a Swedish American co-production somehow, because I don't want to leave Sweden, but then shoot most parts of it and have it like, because it needs to be like very, very American in the style, and that also it has much more commercial potential, because I want to like make it like it's a comedy, and it should be like in a language that addresses like a wide audience. So, so that's been I have, these are my two films that I have known for since 10 years ago that I want to do.
Maria, you're kind of a year, in this cycle, you're kind of a year ahead of where Nina is, right? So your film premiered over a year ago and won a bunch of awards and is now up for an Oscar. What kinds of projects have been coming your way? And, are you seeing kind of, bigger budget kind of projects coming to you?
Definitely. But that most of it happening through the Oscar campaign, not because of European Film Awards nomination. To be honest, I think it's I've got not to offend any producers, but it's a bit ridiculous offers I've got. Huge budgets, already developed. Can you come and fix the psychology between the actors here? No, but you get this. So then you come again as this female director who's gonna, fix it. The parts which are not done. Because I ask, why me? Why me? And I personally, I'm not very interested in huge budgets per se. Not at all. I'm not very interested in working in the States necessarily. I'm interested in cool projects. I want to survive. I want to have an economy that makes me able to do the stuff I want to. I never had a 10-year plan ever in my life. I don't look at it as a career. you know, I was going to die 9 years ago, you know, so I've been started on zero. So now I can make new plans. But I have projects I want to do. I wanted to do a project in Mexico for 2 years, and then Corona came, and I couldn't go there for research. But it's not dead. The project is not dead. I'm now working with Danes because I've been Danish as well, a student there. I'm you know, I don't think about figures in that sense. I want to have the figures which a project needs.
Right.
Yeah. So it's about having a flow, having a freedom. And of course, I mean, it helps with money. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm not like the larger budgets, the better. Because with the larger budgets, very often less control. And suddenly you are not able to deliver what they ask for because they don't know the recipe for what you're doing. You know,
right.
how you get to make that. So you have to be, I have a friend who's a painter, and she was giving us a talk, and she said, you know, my talent is so big, or so little. So I have to go 360 degrees around it all the time to be, you know, to keep on. But she knows what she's going for all the time. But
right.
you know, so it's all about the choices you make if you have success, like you do now, Ninja. You know, attention. It's all about what you choose to do and not what everyone else comes and wants you to do. So that's the talent, how you direct that possibility you have now.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's very perceptive and useful, especially to all the aspiring filmmakers in the audience. And I want to go to Nisha now, you know, who has made a $500,000 movie to an almost $20 million movie to you know, television shows with all kinds of budgets. You know, has that been your experience, that kind of the bigger the budget, the kind of less sort of creative control you have?
That was definitely the fear. There were a couple of, I guess, you know, I saw so many friends come out of Sundance with the heat, as they say here, and then turn down every project that was offered to them, looking for something amazing, and then found themselves a year later, like kind of replaced by the next Sundance winner, and then not really getting any film off the ground. And so I think I was so keenly aware, like it was so nice to have the success late in a way, in the sense that when it did come, I was like, oh my God, it's happening. It's me this time. And then I was like, don't blow it, you know, like just trying to. So I think that's why I so quickly got into the high note, because you know, that was insane to have 2 movies open in theaters within a 12-month period like that. I like, you know, from like shot late night when I was pregnant, then was in the middle of shooting High Note when it opened theatrically, and then finished it like all within that period. And then, you know, I think it was, the door was closed for so long to me that I've just sort of rushed through and said yes to everything I always ever wanted to do. So it's been a different experience, but I was afraid that doing a big studio film was going to be a lot more like, it was explained to me once in such a great way that episodic directing is like, when you're making your own movie, you're looking forward and you do your take, and then you say, okay, great, and then we're going to go forward, we're moving on. And in television, you look at the take and you go, great, and then you turn behind you and you go, is everyone okay if we move on, you know? And so I kind of was thinking, oh, the feature is going to be sort of like that. But I think because I sought out Working Title and Focus, or Working Title is a company I've loved for years, and they define themselves as a director's company, and Focus Features and Universal define themselves as a filmmakers company. So those two together led to like a really incredible experience where I had a lot of creative flexibility. I mean, one thing I didn't have was, you know, obviously the studio was like, and here's the star that will give you the budget that you want, you know? So that was a little rough, like being handed one of the main actors and not understanding like the you know, that, okay, your biggest asset as a director is casting. And so so many of the studio films, like Maria's saying, they come to you and they've already got this cast and they've already got this you know, the script is gone. And a lot of the times I think I'm reading a lot of scripts coming my way and going, God, I wouldn't even turn this in. Like I would be horrified to hand this in. And yet this one's greenlit and and has a start date. And what the hell is happening? Like, how is this? And
Right.
so I'm still trying to learn, like, why are these movies go movies and these ones are still trying to get made, even though they're incredibly written and the characters are so incredibly well drawn. So I feel like I've gone on such a weirdo tangent. I don't know what you're asking now.
Perfect. Actually, it's perfect. And
I also just put my baby to bed. Just kidding. Matilda's
it's 1 o'clock. I guess she could be down for a nap.
We're all trying to squeeze in our panels on sleep schedules. That's something I don't know if other directors have to do. We're like, but no, it wasn't. It was, to my surprise, and also a lot of the television I've been able to do, and I think it's skillfully navigating that with my amazing agent that you know, to just pick the more auteur-driven series where they kind of come to you and say, bring something to it as a director, so that you're not just doing what I call coverage supervision, where you're not just sort of giving them footage for the editing room, but you're actually bringing something to it as a director.
Yeah.
So I've been really pleased with the way it's gone so far. I haven't had to have those sort of painful everybody weighing in experiences so far.
Do you think the movies, that sort of stack of scripts you were describing that are like, don't feel polished to you, but somehow have cast attached and they're just looking for a director, do you think that it's because they're based on comps, like that, like some business affairs unit or, you know, is figuring out like, you know, this storyline plus that actor is like, these last 2 movies are going to make this amount of money. Like, are they're business deals?
I wonder, sometimes it comes down to just like, oh, we didn't have a comedy and we needed a comedy and this comedy
Right.
landed on our desk, or, you know, it's hard to figure out, because the thing I think when I was an indie filmmaker in New York was I thought everybody in Hollywood must be an idiot, you know, and then you move here and you go on these meetings and you're like, these are really intelligent people. Like, they're really smart. They're very passionate. They love movies. They know exactly what compromise they're making and why. And that to me was more shocking. Like, I thought, oh, you're doing this on purpose? Like, you know what you're doing? But it's a weird math equation I haven't figured out yet.
Although sometimes I also think it's muddied by a collective process, right? Like, there's so many different people in the mix, whether it's the, you know, different studio people, production company, the, you know, agents, like all, like, sometimes I feel like they're just too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, for sure.
Matilda, as a producer, what are you seeing and sort of?
Kirsten, on that, like, what's interesting, what Maria's saying is that she's being brought in to fix these things, and what's curious to me is that, like, if you're responding to these movies, like you go see Pleasure and you're like, oh my God, this is so incredible. Now let's get that filmmaker and bring her in here and then take away everything that she needed to make her special. Like, don't give her her DP, don't give her her designer, don't give her her editor, just like force all these other people on her and then be like, do that magic thing again, go, you know, without any of your support team or your it's a collaborative art. Like, we pretend it's the director and the filmmaker, and yes, everything's filtered through us, but I can't make a movie by myself. Like, it's absolutely this team of my keys that we're all collaborating together. So that's so interesting to me about the process too, of like, come fix this, Maria, but don't use anything. You can't have any of your tools, you know?
Yeah, I feel like I hear that from a lot of, I mean, I mostly talk to female directors. Male directors might also hear this, but this thing that you come out of a festival with, you know, I'm going to call it sort of an art film or an artfully made film, and then they're like sending scripts that just are so off, kind of off brand, if that's a thing, or just like out of the box things.
But it's also like I was walking on the street with my partner who ran into an actor that she knows who was just coming off this David Fincher movie, and he was going on and on about what a genius, literally using the word genius for David Fincher, and saying, and I was just listening nearby and kind of like just, you know, observing this conversation. And the evidence for what made David Fincher a genius was that he could do every single person's job on that set. Like he knew, you know, every role on that set, everybody's duties. And we walked for a little bit and I was like, you know, I know everybody's role on a set, as does every director. That's our job, to know exactly what everybody else is doing on that set and how to help them do it the best they can do it. And she was like, really? You do? I was like, yeah, we do. No one's calling me a genius for knowing what to do for my job.
Right.
And I think she just didn't know that that's what directors do. But I feel like, you know, it's a strange thing that we're somehow on that personal thing, like you're in there as a ball of emotions, not knowing the technical stuff. But obviously look at these incredible, and also just all of you, I'm such a fan of your movies and your voices, but there's incredible technical skill going on in each of your movies. It's insane to me that it's overlooked, you know.
Well, but this is across all fields, right? Like, you know, that men are thought of as geniuses and women are, but we're changing that. That's changing.
The genius movement.
Yeah. So here's a question from Helen. I'm going to assume that's Helen from Women in Film International, who's asking, have you had help from other women in your career, and have you also helped other women? I'm actually going to start with Nisha, and then we'll go through a few others. So Nisha, you were talking a little bit ago about feeling like there weren't a lot of mentors, or you weren't seeing a lot of women as you were coming up in your career, but were there any sort of women or men who sort of helped you helped to mentor?
Yeah, no, but I remember when I started, I didn't have any role models, and then came Lisa Skan and Lisa Langset, two Swedish, because for me, I think like it had to be Swedish in order for me to relate and see that it was something that I could also do.
Right.
So they came in. It was super important to see them. They were like maybe 5 years older than me, 5'10" or something like that. So that was like the first time that I could even picture myself as a director, because first when I started, I was like, no, I have these films that I want to do, but I'm not a director. I can't do that, because I had this traditional male genius. I had this idea that it was something that you were born with and like this special ability somehow. But then I knew I had all these visions in my head and I wanted to do it, and I started to make it. And people called me the director, and I was like, okay, you can call me that because we don't have a director, but like, that's not me. I'm not. But then finally I started to identify with that. And I had in my first school, one of my best friends, Fanny Matelius, we went to the same film school, but she was 1 year above me. So, I think she was, because we became very close friends and had been like really following each other, but she was always 1 year ahead. And I remember the first time she said like that, oh, like I'm going to make a feature. And I was like, but you really think that we are going to make like I felt she was so naive, or that she had too high expectations. But then like she made a short film that after the first film school, and that got attention, and then she came into like the academy of film directing. And so because she did it and I was like 1 year behind her, then I was just like, okay, but she can do it, then I can also do it. So I was following her footsteps, and that has just been so important. I don't think if I had to see someone that I like related to do it before I could see myself do it. So it has been a very long journey before, like, and yeah, it's super crucial. And then of course, yeah, we are like I think in Sweden it's not the film industry is not that big, so all of us in the same generation, female directors, we know each other very well, and we're like collaborate a lot, and we read each other's scripts and have dinners and talk shit about the men in the industry, and like, so it's very like a supportive collective, which is totally like, I would never have been here without it.
And do you feel like you're in touch with kind of the next generation that's coming up, that's going to be inspired by you?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I've started to have like teaching and getting to know like, it's weird that I'm actually realizing that I'm not the new generation, because there's a new one coming. So that's like a new identity, to understand that I can be like a inspirational or like role model, or whatever you want to call it. But
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, you have made a very accomplished film. So not only a film that I think is getting, I mean, I think the attention is due, right? Like, because it's a film about the porn industry, you know, it brings a certain amount of attention, but there is, in addition to that, and I think from my perspective, even more important than that is the skill that you brought to telling that specific story. Like, that character is so well drawn. She's so authentic and accessible, as are all of the supporting roles as well. And just because I have you, I'll say that I thought the way that you shot it to be very, very conscious of not kind of replicating some of the, you know, some of the imagery and tropes that are true in that industry is part of what makes it such a successful film.
Yeah, and that's also, as you've been talking before about, that it's because of that, first of all, like the hard work. It's not like it's a method, which is that you really like work and work and work and work. It doesn't just you don't come up with it like that. You try out and you try stuff, and it's wrong, and you try again, and you try again, and you try again, and then you have this like people around you that are so competent, and that you talk like constantly analyzing together, and like turning every stone around, and like looking from each angle in like constant conversation. So it's not like just me making it. It happens together with like in a collective, and it's a process, and it takes a lot of time, and it's hard work. So yeah, that's just so like people think that like, oh, like that is something that just happened, which it's, yeah, and in order to accomplish it, you need to have that. You need to be able to work in that way that works for you, or like to have, yeah, as you were saying before.
I was probably 3/4 of the way through the movie when I realized that we had only seen penises and never seen any vaginas. Which
it actually starts with the vagina, the first thing that happens.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But still, it's not that kind of.
But it's not in a sexual like, yeah, it's a very, very non-pornographic environment.
But also in at least in American film, and I think this is a little different in European film, but you don't see penises in American film like ever. No. I mean, I think it might even get beyond, it might get an NC-17. Especially if you see an erect penis, I think you get an NC-17, which basically like limits the audience and limits the box office. And so even just kind of changing that paradigm, I'm actually really curious to see what rating your film is going to get.
Yeah, we're going to do it, since we're A24 bought it, and they have a really good strategy for it. So it's going to be, we're going to have like the censored version, where we're going to cut out what we have to cut out, right. And then the full version, the uncensored version, in theaters, like smaller theaters, and then we're going to play them to like, so they make a thing about it and create a discussion, because then hopefully like no one wants to go, like it's going to be able to draw attention, and no one want to see the censored version. And then the censored version can also be a second layer to the whole like idea of like to raise even more interesting questions about, yeah, the female gaze and the male gaze, and how we censor things, or like why we are view on where we draw our limits and why.
We could have a whole panel on the American rating system and how problematic it is. It did also, Maria, it struck me in your film, your characters sleep naked. And because of that, like you see them get in and out of bed naked and it just seems normal, which is like not a thing that happens in American movies because of the rating system. We're getting close to the time when we have to end, which is so surprising. This went so quickly. But I wanted to hear from each of you, either, I mean, some of you have talked a little bit about this, but either what your kind of dream project is if you haven't talked about it, or what you are thinking about next. You might not know exactly what you're going to do next, or you might. And so we did hear about from you, Nina, the film that you want to, the American film that you want to make. So you had these two projects you've known for 10 years. Are you starting to think also about the next 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, I had, since I already knew these films 10 years ago, during that period, of course, I've gathered like, oh, I'm actually developing a TV series and a small documentary about the making of this film. But and yeah, but then I also have my third feature, and but I'm not sure. I think after the second one, I want to have raised children and maybe not be this like crazy workaholic person for a while. So I think that would be a good, like, take a little bit of a slower period after the second.
Well, you have three. I heard three of you mention children on this call already, so you could get advice from all of them if you wanted to about how to straddle both. Nisha, do you what are you working on? I know there's a number of things.
I've weirdly kind of pivoted towards television and am working on doing like my own TV series, just because it is like a whole area that is open to women in a way that, you know, has more freedom and ongoing. It's a different type of storytelling. So I'm so curious about Maria's also experience with her story being told in the different format.
Maria, you talked a little bit about that before, about the episodic, but I want, and you've also mentioned a project you want to do in Mexico. What else are you thinking about?
Yeah, the Mexico project is about being 19 years old, traveling, and the 6 months in your life when you are naive and totally over-empowered. And, this coming of age in a way, but very dramatic one. But that one I have to wait until the, times get better so we can travel and experience. But that one I would like to make in a very much more loose way than what I've been working until now, which has been very, intimate drama, both this movie and the Limbo, which I made in Trinidad and Tobago 10 years ago. And then I'm developing a project together with other writers, which is like totally outside of my comfort zone. So, which is more about the world and not so much about the inner lives, about what happened in 95 when the first 2015, when the first refugees came to a Greek island. So it's a sort of a microcosmos of a Danish family going to a resort. And there 1 week meeting with the first refugees entering the island, and how this, politically, how your comfort zone and ethics are checked out, yeah, etc. So it's a more that's quite early, but that's a very potent project. It's called which means island. Oh, just in one letter. So, and I've been saying no and no and no to television series. Not yet. Maybe a mini series once. You know, I'm not against television series, but I think that, yeah, I think it's very seldom that I really appreciate limited series. I can deal with. I think that's interesting.
And how about you, Matilda? What are you doing next?
I mean, I'm producing this year 3 feature films. One together in Sweden, together with Eva Åkergren and Renee Esra for director Thyberg Novotny. And then also together with Renee Esra, I'm producing a Danish film with Cecilia McNair. It's her debut film. And then Malou Ryman's next feature film, hopefully we're shooting end of this year, which is a historical drama that is based on true stories or true events. And it's about a group of women that is too strong for their time.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Amazing that you have so many different things going at once.
Yeah, I mean, right now it's crazy. And lockdown, I'm sitting in a summer house with, partner and baby, and my sister came today, and it was like, okay, and I'm producing these films, but we're so lucky that we still can go and shoot. I mean, everything is locked down, but the film biz is still going, so that's amazing.
Well, with a lot of safety precautions in place.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Any final comments, anything I didn't get to that you want to contribute before we wrap up? Thank you all so much for this conversation and for making the incredible films that you have and will make. All of them in their each way have helped to shape culture, and in many cases, I think, help propel forward this cause of achieving gender equity within our industry and within the larger society. So thank you for your work. Also big thanks to Women in Film and Television International, Women in Film and Video in DC, and of course to the Norwegian Embassy for sponsoring this event. Thank you.